Thank you, Alex. Gary, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Please.
O thou kind Lord, O thou who art generous and merciful, we are the servants of thy threshold and are gathered beneath the sheltering shadow of thy divine unity. The sun of thy mercy is shining upon all, and the clouds of thy bounty shower upon all. Thy gifts encompass all. Thy loving providence sustains all. Thy protection overshadows all. And the glances of thy favor are cast upon all. O Lord, grant thine infinite bestowals and let the light of thy guidance shine. Illumine the eyes, gladden the hearts with abiding joy. Confer a new spirit upon all people and bestow upon them eternal light. Unlock the gates of true understanding and let the light of faith shine resplendent. Gather all people beneath the shadow of thy bounty and cause them to unite in harmony so that they may become as the rays of one sun, as the waves of one ocean, and as the fruit of one tree. May they drink the same fountain. May they be refreshed by the same breeze. May they receive illumination from the same source of light. Thou art the giver, the merciful, the omnipotent.
Thank you, Gary. Corey, are you ready?
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
Please, yes.
I'm going to read the first 3 paragraphs of a letter from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. This is the head administrative body for Baha'is in the United States. And they periodically send out letters that have some encouragement and some suggestions, recommendations for where we ought to be focusing our energies as Baha'is. And in this letter, they give a brief synopsis of the earliest history of the Baha'i faith in the United States as a reminder of what the sort of purpose and destiny of the Baha'i faith in the United States was. So I'm going to read those 3 paragraphs as an introduction to tonight's theme. To the followers of Baha'u'llah in the United States, cherished friends and co-workers, well over 100 years ago, at virtually the same moment that history would record the birth of the American century, an event of pivotal importance to its destiny took place. A band of North American travelers arrived after a long journey in the Holy Land's port city of Haifa, and after proceeding a short distance to the nearby city of Akka, joyously attained the presence of Abdul Baha, the eldest son of Baha'u'llah, and the center of his covenant and perfect exemplar of his teachings. The event was little noted by a world oblivious to the birth, let alone the implications, of a new revelation from God. Yet the impact upon these few souls of meeting the one they adored as master and in whom they experienced the very incarnation of divine love was to have incalculable consequences for the future of their nation and for humanity itself. America at the time was a nation young, dynamic, and growing in material strength as it rapidly emerged on the world stage. In 1912, only a few years after he received the first group of American visitors in the Holy Land, Abdul Baha arrived in North America for an 8-month sojourn, heralding a new narrative of history, the divine narrative that had now reached its consummation with the appearance of Baha'u'llah, the promised one of all ages. It was a narrative not of excessive national pride, but of universal justice, of love and unity. The master acknowledged the material attainments and high ideals of the American nation and its people, affirming that America had a special mission and a distinctive contribution to make in world affairs. At the same time, he was uncompromising in asserting that this destiny would be founded on a far more profound basis than anything the citizens of the country had previously imagined. It would be a destiny propelled by the transformative spirit of the Baha'i teachings. Throughout the remaining years of his ministry, Abdu'l-Baha patiently helped his devoted American followers to see and face the challenges of purging themselves and their nation of the corrosive influence of materialism, moral corruption, and racial prejudice. Repeatedly and unequivocally, he stated that only by so doing would America be fitted to fulfill its special destiny to lead all nations spiritually and to usher in the most great peace. In response, through their boundless love for their master, their fidelity to the covenant, and their unity of purpose in service to the cause of God, the tiny community of American believers slowly began to grow and mature.
Thank you, Corey. We are going to revisit this letter from the National Spiritual Assembly for future fireside, in future firesides. Jane, are you ready?
Yes, and I'm
Please.
delighted to introduce Mojgan Zimmer, attorney, community builder, wife, mother, accomplished musician, and champion for racial justice. If it takes a new race of men and women to change the world, Moji's part of that new race. She chose her career as an attorney because she saw the law as a tool for justice. Out of law school, she first lived in DC, and she and her roommate noticed there was a group of young boys just hanging out. Rather than ignoring them, she chose to invite the boys to her home, and she asked them if they would like to participate in a junior youth spiritual empowerment program. They agreed, and every Sunday afternoon, Moji and her roommates and about 10 young men of color from the ages of 10 to 15 would meet and study why it's important to develop spiritual qualities and how they can support each other to be agents of social change. They performed service projects. Every week they would pick up trash in their neighborhood, and they slowly transformed their neighborhood and impacted others to follow their example. Moji chose a wonderful and supportive husband who's here tonight. And after her first daughter was born, she made one of the smartest choices of her life. She bought a house located just behind her mom and stepdad, Minu and Tim Trowerneck. But not to content herself, to devote herself to simply her own career and the needs of her immediate family, she tries to enhance the life of all those around her. She started a neighborhood children's class, hold various adult study groups, and she and her husband host weekly devotions, thus creating a vibrant pattern of community life focused on service. Tonight, she'll talk about the role of her faith in calling for racial justice, reflecting her lifelong commitment to racial unity and justice. Moji?
Wow, Jane, what a great introduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane.
And thank you, Dr. Bashalahi, for inviting me to speak tonight. It's really an honor to be here. My topic for tonight is a united faith calling for racial justice. And it's hard to talk about racial justice without talking about the reasons why we even need to talk about racial justice. That being the historic and institutionalized prejudice and racism that have really resulted in a need for having these discussions. I recognize that discussing our nation's sordid history with regard to race can arouse a lot of feelings of pain and shame and sadness and anger, and that's not my intention at all for our discussion tonight. I'm not even really going to go into any of the details of those things. I'm more looking to talk about things that inspire us and lift us up. And I'd like to talk about the Baha'i faith's historical and unified response to racial prejudice and its current calls for action by its national administrative body. And I'm really glad that Corey read from that letter, because I'm actually also going to be sharing a couple of quotes from that letter tonight. I want to be clear that this is not to say that there aren't people of other faiths that aren't taking action in this area. We know that our Christian, our Muslim, Buddhist, Jewish, and even our atheist brothers and sisters are also very much interested in promoting racial justice and are having these important discussions as well. Something, though, that is unique about the Baha'i faith is that because of our particular system of governance, which I'll speak to a little bit more in depth later, is how this system creates conditions for a unified effort, not only within our community, but across the United States and even across the world. You can go anywhere in the world and you will find Baha'is who are involved in the same activities under the same or very similar framework that we have here, and in working to build spiritual communities and building a united world. So for example, I can go to Papua New Guinea, I can go to the Congo or wherever. I can meet a native Baha'i there, and I talk to them about my weekly devotional. And maybe if it was on a topic of race unity, and I might tell them, how it went, what we learned. And that native person would also likely have a devotional on a topic that is related to eliminating prejudice, or some other topic of social importance to their community. They might talk about what they learned, and then we might talk about what we learned from each other and apply what we learned from each other to our own activities. So this unified effort is, it's important, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I also want to talk a little bit about the Baha'i response to racial injustice in the early 1900s and how unique that response was at the time and how it challenged the social norms and how the effects of those activities continue to have an effect in our community even today. I'm also, and I mentioned this, I'm going to share a little from that letter from the National Spiritual Assembly, which really talks about how the Baha'i community, both on an individual and in a collective basis, should be working to promoting racial justice. I do have some slides that I'm going to share now. Hope that, okay. And 1 second, please. Okay. Is that good? Can everyone see that? Okay,
Yes.
Great. So many of you might know that this month marks 100 years from the Tulsa Massacre in 1921. And I just wanted to dedicate this talk to those people who were unjustly and savagely lost, who unjustly and savagely lost their lives during the massacre. It's interesting though, but also simultaneously during the same month, you may know that that this month marks the 100th anniversary of the first Race Amity Conference that was held in Washington, D.C. This had the support of the President of the United States as well at the time. So I'd also like to dedicate this talk to the memory of those who diligently fought to promote racial justice and to call on them to help us to continue in this fight. And these are just two pictures, one on the right shows the devastation from the Tulsa Massacre. On the left, this is a picture of that first Race Amity Conference, where even during a time of segregation, you can see that people of different races are just very naturally together, which is such a beautiful, beautiful thing for the time especially. So I just wanted to share a little bit about myself first. These are pictures of me with my mom and my dad when I was a little girl. I was born into a Baha'i family. Well, actually, that's not entirely correct. My mother was a Baha'i and my father was Muslim, but my parents agreed to raise me Baha'i. And I also have members of my family who are of the Jewish and Christian backgrounds. It's a pretty unique experience when you're raised a Baha'i, because from a very young age, you are taught about the unity of religion. That is that Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, who is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. And these are just a few of the divine messengers, I'm just naming a few here. That these divine messengers have all come from the same eternal source, who we call God, or some people might call Allah or Yahweh, because as we know, God has so many names. That God, the ancient creator of everything, of all that we know, and much, 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 much more that we don't know, is here really to help us grow and develop and helping us in our spiritual evolution. So as a Baha'i, you learn to revere and worship all of these divine beings for whom God has sent here for us to know God, to love God, and to reap the blessings of God. And again, that would be namely through our individual and collective spiritual evolution. I just have another slide here, kind of a graphic that might show that. In addition to this idea of the unity of religion and the unity of God, and when I say the unity of God, I mean this idea of the one God that we come to know through these different messengers, is the integral concept of the unity of humanity, which can only come about through the elimination of various prejudices that plague our society. And we know what these prejudices are. We see them daily, either political prejudice, class, sex, race. I mean, the list, it goes on and on. Baha'is believe that it is only through the recognition of all of these divine messengers and through the power of the Holy Spirit that we can be united, and that our work towards this unity is really the purpose of our lives. So yeah, unity is pretty important in the Baha'i faith. There's this quote that I wanted to share. It's one of my favorite quotes. And it says, "So powerful is the light of unity that it can illumine the whole earth." When I first heard this quote, I thought, oh, that's such nice imagery. What a nice metaphor. Of course, light illumines. We know that light symbolizes the light of God, the light of the love of God, the knowledge of God, and that illumination, symbolizes spiritual rejuvenation, and our souls become bright with this love and knowledge of God. And it was really a very beautiful image that I felt it was a beautiful image. But later in life, I thought more about how this quote also applies to like a physical element in our world. Baha'is often use the physical world to describe the spiritual world. And Baha'u'llah actually said that every created thing is a sign of the revelation of God, and that the physical world has the capacity to reflect and manifest spiritual qualities. So, using this kind of analogy and this thought that the spiritual and the physical world kind of reflect each other, I thought, what illuminates our earth? Well, we know the sun does, right? And how does the sun illumine the earth? Well, through science. Thank you very much, science. I love science. We have learned that it is through nuclear fusion. And so what is nuclear fusion? So we know now that nuclear fusion are just these hydrogen atoms that are with very great intensity of force or attraction. Some people might call that love. These hydrogens love each other so much. We might even call that unity. And for the sake of this talk, let's just call it unity. We'll call it nuclear fusion. We'll say this is intense unity of hydrogens. Doesn't that, it sounds much better, doesn't it? So, these hydrogens that are so intent on being unified with each other, the lighter hydrogen elements, they unite together with this incredible force to become heavier elements. And we know that when this happens, that this is the reason that heat and energy come forth, that this unity creates an intense amount of energy. It actually creates it. It's this heat and energy from the sun that gives our world light and life. Without it, we'd be gone. We wouldn't be here. Isn't that interesting that our whole physical existence on this earth is completely and wholly dependent on unity? I mean, it's the unity of hydrogens, but it's unity nonetheless. And since this physical world is a reflection of the spiritual world, as we discussed, then our spiritual existence is equally, completely, and wholly dependent on unity. When we draw this comparison between the physical and spiritual worlds, how can we even think of going through life without being completely unified with every single person who crosses our path. Baha'u'llah says, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. You'll notice there's a lot of like fire imagery in the Baha'i writings. Burn, what else burns? The sun burns, right? Light, there's a lot of this beautiful imagery of intensity and heat and closeness. So our spiritual life, our very spiritual existence as individuals and as a society, as a humanity, depends on unity. If you take anything away from this analogy, I would just like for you to always imagine yourself as like a little hydrogen atom. And then all the people that you see, all the humans as other little hydrogen atoms. And I just would love for you to see those other hydrogen atoms and think, who are actually people. This is like a weird analogy, I realize. But just think, you know, I want to create energy with this person. And I just want to unite with this person and bring light to the world. That would be really great. I would really love for people to just keep that imagery with them. There's another really important quote from Baha'u'llah that relates to justice. And this is the quote over here. I have it on the screen. The light of men is justice, quench it not with the contrary winds of oppression and tyranny. The purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among men. And when it says men in the Baha'i writings, it's referring to humanity, not like actually just men. So Baha'u'llah said the purpose of justice is the appearance of unity. So what does this mean? It means that the reason we have justice is for unity to come about. When it says appearance, it's not talking about like, oh, like a reflection. It means for something to appear. So unity is dependent on justice. This is important because sometimes we think that unity is just about turning a blind eye or about forgiveness, but this quote actually suggests otherwise. Of course, we know forgiveness is important and it plays its own role in justice, but it plays it in a very specific way. When asked about this relationship between justice and unity, Abdu'l-Baha said, thus, if someone were to attack, injure, oppress, and wound me, I would in no wise oppose him, but would show forgiveness. But if someone were to attack Manshadi here, I guess there was a guy named Manshadi sitting next to him. Abdullah continues, he says, I would of course prevent him. Although to the assailant, non-interference would appear as kindness, it would be sheer oppression toward Manshadi. So if someone were to enter this room at this moment brandishing a sword and bent upon assaulting, wounding, or killing you, I would of course prevent him. Were I to abandon you to that man, this would be oppression, not justice. But if he were to harm me personally, I would forgive him. I don't know why people are brandishing swords back then, but anyway. So Abdu'l-Baha, he shows us here how it is the duty of every person and the community to defend the victim, and not the duty of the victim to defend his or herself. In fact, it's the victim's role to work on forgiving the assailant, as hard as that might be. The community ignoring the injustice is not a kindness, it is a sheer oppression. I raise these quotes because I think it's important for us to think about this in light of the injustices that our BIPOC brothers and sisters have endured, and those are our Black, Indigenous, and people of color brothers and sisters have really had to like deal with for centuries, up until even, you know, we still see so much atrocity in some of the things that are happening. So we have to ask ourselves, how can we rise up and defend as community, as individuals against injustice, and in particular racial justice? And how can we help allow those who are victims of racial injustice to work on forgiveness? Of course, I realize that this is difficult. It's really hard to always work for justice. It's difficult to forgive. It's difficult to work toward unity. It's hard to let our hearts burn with loving kindness for all who may cross our path. And that's not just for, people we like, it's for everyone, right? But we really have to do this because our spiritual existence depends on it. Abdu'l-Baha actually said that it's not just our spiritual existence that depends on this. It's actually our physical existence, our continuation of a society actually depends on it too. Abdu'l-Baha, who Corey mentioned earlier, is the eldest son of Baha'u'llah, and he's the person that Baha'u'llah authorized as the interpreter of his writings. He spoke about the effects of the lack of unity on society, and in particular about the effects of us not reaching unity, and specifically racial unity. He said, "Until these prejudices are entirely removed from the people of the world, the realm of humanity will not find rest. Nay, rather, discord and bloodshed will be increased day by day, and the foundation of the prosperity of the world of man will be destroyed. Now is the time for the Americans to take up this matter and unite both the white and black races. Otherwise, hasten ye towards destruction, hasten ye toward devastation. Indeed, there is a greater danger than only the shedding of blood. It is the destruction of America." This is very interesting. Abdu'l-Baha is like a 70-year-old Persian man coming to America, and he's talking about this in the early 1900s. This is like 1912 that he's saying this. This quote, "Indeed, there is a greater danger than only the shedding of blood. It is the destruction of America." That terrifies me. But I wonder, aren't we kind of seeing this right now? Maybe not wholly, maybe we haven't yet seen the complete destruction of America. But I can tell you that if we don't figure out a way to unite fully and completely and wholly, that we are headed there. Abdu'l-Baha actually spoke to this too. He said, because aside from the racial prejudice, there is another agitating factor. It is that of America's enemies. These enemies are agitating both sides. That is, they are stirring up the white race against the black race and the black race against the white race. But of this, the Americans are submerged in the sea of ignorance. They will regret it. I wanted to share this quote. Again, this is from the early 1900s. Because as a country, we also need to be on alert. We know that people like to agitate each other, either because they are trolls on the internet, or even because they are foreign powers who are looking to break down our society because they want to be, the superpower of the world. I don't know what the reason really is, but and we actually saw this happen. If you follow the news, you may have seen in the last 2 election cycles that there were foreign powers who were masquerading as US persons and wreaking havoc and enticing both sides, really pretending to be Americans, using racially charged rhetoric because they know that it's a topic that is really so important and integral and that it's dividing the United States. So we have to be on alert and guard ourselves against that disunity and against people who are trying to actually entice us to be disunified. Abdu'l-Baha, he presented a lot of very revolutionary concepts during his time in the United States with regard to racial unity. And as I mentioned, this is in the early 1900s. He's in his 70s. This year, it also actually marks the 100th anniversary of Abdu'l-Baha's passing. So I also just wanted to speak a little bit about the things he did, the very effective, transformative, and radical yet simple things that he did for racial justice in America, and especially in this region. He actually visited DC in 1912 during his tour out here. Abdu'l-Baha, he holds a special place for Baha'is because he is seen as an example to the Baha'i community and how we should live. And so we read stories about the things he did. which, you know, he was always known to radiate love and unity and joy, and just people just flock to him. And we try to emulate those qualities and those virtues. Abdu'l-Baha's father, Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, you know, he was imprisoned and tortured and exiled in the mid to late 1800s, because the religious elite in Iran were very threatened by his influence and by how much the people loved him. Abdu'l-Baha was only 8 years old when his father was imprisoned, and he was later exiled with his father at the age of 9 and remained imprisoned with his father along with the rest of Baha'u'llah's family until 1908 with the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And this was like a harsh exile. You know, they had to travel by foot in intense heat or cold, depending on when they were exiled. They were exiled from Tehran to Baghdad, to Constantinople, to Adrianople, and finally to Akka, which was then Palestine, but is modern day Israel. And the reason they kept exiling Baha'u'llah and his family was because wherever Baha'u'llah went, there were droves of people who flocked to him. They revered him, they respected him. And this was not just the population, these were also these high government officials. And as a result, the Persian government kept, you know, urging the Ottoman Empire, you need to like push him further away, you need to put him somewhere more remote. Immediately after Abdu'l-Baha was released from prison, he took it upon himself to travel so he could share Baha'u'llah's message of unity and the oneness of humanity. And that's when he came to the US in 1912. These are just some pictures of Abdu'l-Baha during the time. There was a lot of pictures and some articles in the newspapers. There was a lot of buzz when Abdu'l-Baha came, because there were a lot of people who had learned about the Baha'i faith, a lot of socialites and people of upper and middle classes were very much drawn to this idea of unity and to the Baha'i writings. And, you know, we have the New York, I don't know if it was the New York Times or the New York Herald, but one of those New York newspapers reported that his mission was to do away with prejudice of nationality, of race, of religion. And the article also directly quoted him to say that the time has come for humanity to hoist the standard of the oneness of the human world, so that dogmatic formulas and superstitions may end. How was America in 1912 when Abdu'l-Baha came? You know, what was it like racially? A lot of us know, I mean, we know from history, even though history at times is skewed, but America in 1912, this was nearly 50 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that freed every slave, but still decades away from realizing Abdu'l-Baha's vision of racial equality. And African Americans in 1912, although they were freed from oppressive slavery, they were still almost universally regarded as lesser than whites at this time. We know that we had the Jim Crow laws of segregation then, which were only empowered by Supreme Court rulings and decisions that determined that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution did not protect any Black person from discrimination by private businesses and individuals. So, you know, that type of injustice really solidified a racial caste system, which was further reinforced from many of the pulpits of many of America's churches that were still segregated at that time, and that tried to make excuses for why segregation was appropriate. It was also, you know, these scientists, phrenologists, and social Darwinists who claimed that persons of color were inferior, that they were innately inferior, you know, both intellectually and culturally. And obviously, as science progressed, I mean, that wasn't even based on science, but, you know, science demonstrated that was just such a ridiculous thing. You know, Abdu'l-Baha came to the United States under this type of culture and under this type of like experience, American experience, yet he still regularly challenged this segregation, this backwards culture. And he called on those who were attracted to the Baha'i faith or who were entering the Baha'i faith to really implement this vision of racial equality And he did so himself by some bold and unconventional actions. I did want to just speak to a few of those things that happened in the early 1900s. This is one story of Abdu'l-Baha in his first days in Washington, D.C. He was invited to the home of a Persian diplomat who also happened to be a Baha'i for this very grand luncheon with all these elite Washington, D.C. socialites and persons of, high government position. And Abdu'l-Baha, he was at this luncheon. It was after a talk that he gave, I believe it was at Howard University. And he was there, and this talk at Howard University was integrated. So there were people of Black and white backgrounds there. And as he's about to sit, he sees that there was one individual who wasn't there, and that was Louis Gregory. That's this picture of him on the top right, you'll see. Louis Gregory was an American Black lawyer in DC. And Abdul was frantically, he's asking, where's Louis Gregory? Where is he? And this host, he's like, the host is embarrassed. He's like hastily arranging the seating, trying to go find Louis Gregory, who had walked with Abdul to this home. And they go run and get him, and Louis Gregory comes in, and Abdul takes Louis Gregory and he seats him to the right of Abdu'l-Baha. So Abdu'l-Baha is sitting at the head of the table as the guest, and people know back then, and even still today, the right seat is the seat of honor. That seat at the table to the right of the host is the seat of honor. And so, with this one small act in front of all of these socialites and people who don't even engage in these integrated type scenarios, haven't even been to integrated meetings, they see Abdu'l-Baha, who is this guest of honor, with one act basically sweep aside these practices of segregation by race, these categorizations by social rank, and he sets a powerful example in challenging those customs. Baha'is like to talk about this story because we try to embody and remember the importance of taking bold action in times where, maybe the social norm doesn't really want that action to happen or doesn't really expect that action, but how important it is when it is for justice. Abdu'l-Baha would often share Baha'u'llah's writings on what Baha'u'llah had said about persons of African descent, and Baha'u'llah likened them to the pupil of the eye. Baha'u'llah said that in this Black pupil, you see the reflection of which is before it, and through it, the light of the spirit shines forth. And Abdu'l-Baha would further elaborate on this theme, this topic of the pupil of the eye. And he said to Louis Gregory, he said, I liken you to the pupil of the eye. You are Black and it is black, yet it becomes the focus of light. And we know physically from our discussion earlier, this idea that, the physical elements actually have a spiritual explanation, that this idea of light, we have our physical light, but we also have the spiritual light, the light of truth, the light of the love of God. It's a very interesting spiritual physical analogy that the focus of spiritual light, the focus of the spiritual light of God can be experienced through the Black population, persons of African descent. It's just very interesting to me. That has very deep implications in how Baha'is see how these spiritual acts should be taken, who we should reach out to when we are looking to share these types of things. There's another story I wanted to share that occurred back then, and it's also related to things that happen now. So there were 58 delegates from 43 cities who needed to elect 9 members to a governing board for the Baha'i temple. And this was a national body that was formed to coordinate the largest project ever undertaken by the Baha'is in North America. And if you haven't seen it, this is the Baha'i temple in Chicago. I'd really highly recommend you visit it if you're ever there. It's in Wilmette. So after the first round of voting, which was done by secret ballot, Baha'is always vote by secret ballot, there was a tie for 9th place. And that tie was between Frederick Nutt, who was a white doctor from Chicago, and Louis Gregory, who was a Black lawyer from Washington, D.C. And how do you think these men responded to this tie? Well, each man resigned in favor of the other. Isn't that remarkable? Can you imagine this happening in our political system today? A tie, and one is resigning for the other person. And that's not where the story ends. One of the delegates stood up and put forward a proposal his motion was seconded by another delegate, and they recommended that the convention accept Dr. Nutt's resignation. So Dr. Nutt was the white doctor from New York. Or I'm sorry, he was from Chicago. And all the other delegates, the 58 delegates, they responded unanimously. You know, back then, to have elected an African American to a governing board of the national organization of a largely middle and upper class white, that was largely middle and upper class white Americans during the Jim Crow era was very, very rare. Even the NAACP had only elected one Black member to its executive community when it formed in 1909. And it just gives you a glimpse that when Baha'is elect to positions of, I guess I would say positions of power, we wouldn't really call them positions of power. We'd call them more positions of service. But when there are these positions available, the Baha'i majority looks to put those who are minorities in those positions of power. That's very, very unique. We don't really see that in other systems of governance. You know, this is such a stark contrast from our political system back then, and even more so today. Just even think about, and I don't want to get political, but just think about the last election cycle, or the last 2, or the last 10. How did those election cycles make you feel, honestly? Did they spark joy? Why do we engage in things that are not inspiring us? And why are we engaging in empowering systems that are the root causes of disunity? Think about what would have happened if there was a tie in our political system. They might take it to court. We actually saw this in a political campaign, I think it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. Maybe the incumbent refuses to leave. Maybe they bring distrust to the voting system. They might try to change the voting system to better benefit them, maybe by restricting voting in certain areas, or by gerrymandering, or pointing fingers, saying the other person is incompetent. I mean, it goes on and on. You know, there's always this very high conflict situation when we see our political system. And it's no wonder that our system is so defunct. You know, the system, it breeds behavior where candidates are not here to serve the people, they're here to serve themselves and their egos. I know this is a sensitive topic, and it's not really the topic of the presentation. It is related in some way, especially when we go back to that quote that I shared earlier, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. And really to see that when there is disunity, you know, how does it affect our processes? In stark contrast to our current political system is the Baha'i system of administration and governance. It elects 9 representatives at the local, national, and international levels. There's no campaigning, there's no electioneering. It's all done by secret ballot. Voting is done every year, except at the international level. I believe that's at 5 years. Voting occurs after prayer and meditation by the individual and for the community. One of the most remarkable things about this election process is that if there is a tie between 9th place, the person who gets that position is the person who has a greater minority status. There's no system in the world that operates like this. They don't revote. There's not a revote. There's not a like, oh, we need to figure out, you know, the ballots, or maybe do some, you know, talk about it or anything like that. They give it to the person who has greater minority status. There's no system in the world that operates like this. And I can tell you from my personal experience that I've seen it work in the Baha'i community. I've seen minorities who are tied for 9th place actually get the position because of this requirement. And I see the system, you know, it's still early stages, but I see it grow and get better year and year after year as the community grows. And if you're wondering how these 9 people might come to decisions, it's done through a process that Baha'is revere of consultation. And it's really this idea that you put your idea forth, you don't hold on to that idea. You're not attaching your ego to that idea. You're giving it to the group, and maybe other people put their ideas forth. Maybe a vote is taken, and based off of that vote, the majority, a decision is made. And there's no like dissenting opinion. There's no like, oh, that person whose idea wasn't expected goes and complains about it. It's just accepted, and in a very unified way. And the reason being, again, is because the spirit of unity overcomes even a wrong decision that might be made or might have been made. That through this energy forming power of unity, which is really the power of the Holy Spirit, that a wrong decision will be made right, but that you need that unity first and foremost. And this kind of speaks to that power of the Holy Spirit. This is something that Abdullah said in a talk that he gave. He said, but there is a need for a superior power to overcome human prejudices, a power which nothing in the world of mankind can withstand, and which will overshadow the effect of all other forces at work in human conditions. That irresistible power is the love of God. It is my hope and prayer that it may destroy the prejudice of this one point of distinction between you and unite you all permanently under its hallowed protection. Last week, the National Spiritual Assembly for the Baha'is of the United States, they wrote a letter to the Baha'is for the United States, but it really was for all people, all Americans and all US people. The letter talked a little bit about how Abdu'l-Baha acknowledged the high ideals and spiritual capacity of the American nation. It affirmed that America had a special mission and a distinctive contribution to make in world affairs. And as Corey had read earlier, that this would be done through the purging of the corrosive influence of materialism, moral corruption, and racial prejudice. And that only by doing so, only by purging ourselves from materialism, moral corruption, and racial prejudice, that America would be able to fulfill its spiritual destiny, its special destiny to lead all nations spiritually and to usher in world peace. This is my favorite part of the letter that I wanted to share with everyone. It says, the vital necessity of sharing this message with African Americans and indigenous peoples whose capabilities and ultimately indispensable contributions to the advancement of this cause have been attested to in the writings of our faith. And this phrase, this cause, this is what Baha'is refer to, the cause of God, the unification of humankind as envisioned by Baha'u'llah. So we often refer to it as the cause or the cause of God. And the letter goes on to say, although teaching is incumbent on all believers without restriction, it is crucial that in particular, the African American and indigenous believers of this country arise and take their rightful place at the forefront of this work. I had to read these 2 paragraphs a few times. And this last paragraph, it talks about teaching. I just want to speak really quickly about that. Baha'is are enjoined to teach, to share the message of God, and that it's each of our responsibilities to grow spiritually and to help and encourage others in their spiritual development. It's not like a proselytizing. We don't go and like force any ideas on people. We just offer it. And if people are interested, like many of you who have come, you might come and just learn about it. But we do really like to share the message for this idea of unity and spiritual development. But in the second paragraph, the language that was really interesting is it says crucial and forefront, you know, that it's crucial that particular African-American indigenous believers of the country arise and take their rightful place at the forefront of this work. So, you know, I see this language and I think of it together with the Baha'i writings that we read earlier that state the station of people of African descent being likened to the pupil of the eye for which the light of God can shine forth. And this is very profound. I mean, this short paragraph to me, it clearly says that the Baha'i community and those friends of the Baha'is who support the Baha'is in establishing the unity and peace and in spreading the message of God's cause, it really requires that its leaders be African American and indigenous peoples, and that it is the service of these souls that will be instrumental to the growth and development of a truly just, a truly inclusive and unified society. The letter ends with this quote. I also really love this quote. It says, "The spirit of the divine plan is one of sincere love, of humble assistance to one another, of walking side by side and learning together in the path of service. What remains for us is to do our part, to exert every effort to share the divine message with our fellow citizens and to invite them to join hearts and hands with us in the glorious work of reconstructing society to a new design founded in spiritual truth." So I ask everyone here, how can we support this? How can we encourage and put people who have the capacity to focus the light of God and to reflect the Spirit of God in positions of service, of positions of power, where their contributions will inevitably cause the advancement of unity? And that's the question that I would like really to end with, and for us to really think about daily, to ask ourselves. And I hope that you will do that. Thank you. That's all I have for this evening.
Wow. Alex, can we bring the whole view?
Yes, I'm going to stop my share.
This is ironic. Tonight, again, I have to thank Mom first before I thank our speaker, really. I have known this family for a long time. I've seen the really growth and development and how this wonderful young lady has come to fruition and all this development. This really makes me so happy. This is one of the special nights for me. And I have to thank Minu and also, of course, Tim for all the effort that they put. Nothing comes without paying the energy, paying the price for it. And then I have to thank this young lady for what a wonderful, wonderful job that she has done. So thorough and from many respects. I can sit here and talk about it in different ways and different respects, but really, truly wonderful. And I thank you very much, Morgan. It's a very, excuse me, it's a very special night for me to see you in this position, really. Thank you so much. And thank you, Minu and Tim, really. Wonderful, wonderful. Alex, it's all back to you.
Of course. Well, I want to make sure we highlight one other person to thank, which is Kurt, who's also on the call tonight.
Thank you so much for always finding my where I missed, really. Thank you. Go ahead. Of course. Thank him. Thank him.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Moshi, for the presentation this evening. Certainly you touched on a number of topics which are lighting up the chat here. So I'll make sure to try and address as many as we can this evening. For the first question, the questioner writes, when Abdu'l-Baha challenged the racial separation that was embedded in American law, did the American Baha'is push back against him, or did they say, hey, he might be onto something here. Maybe we should think about this differently?
Mhm.
Good question. You know, when people embraced the Baha'i faith early on, you know, they were really, really inspired by these beautiful writings. But we know that spiritual growth is a process. You know, we don't just, some people actually believe and it's very instantaneous and they just, their heart is filled with love and they just full force go forward. And we see this happen. We see it actually, we saw it with the disciples of Christ, although even in some cases, they may have wavered. We saw this in the disciples, the early Baha'i believers of Baha'u'llah and the Bab. So there is the ability to just completely embrace and embody and not have issue. Of course, that's not always the case. So there were some, you know, difficulties and some growing pains with the American Baha'i community. You know, when Abdu'l-Baha would come and say, you need to be integrated. This is racial unity. This is the unity of humanity is one of the major tenets of the Baha'i faith. So early on, you know, there were actually segregated meetings and, you know, Baha'is were just following the rules of society at that time. And Abdu'l-Baha actually said he would not visit the United States until the Baha'is integrated. And because they were for years, they were trying to get Abdu'l-Baha after he had left prison. They really wanted him to come. And he said he wouldn't even visit until that happened. So, you know, that was, you know, immediately after the Baha'is integrated. And they had a lot of love and success and unity as a result. So it's interesting. That's a very good question. So yeah, there was a little bit of the learning and trying to implement these spiritual beliefs and to really make it a part of their lifestyle. But that was a process for a lot of people. And we don't become perfect, you know, when we believe. That's part of the human reality is that we have faults, you know, and some people might call them sins. We have these things that sometimes make it difficult for us to, like, you know, to fully be those perfect beings. And we're not expected to be perfect, but, you know, we're struggling and we're trying, and it's a day-to-day type process.
Thank you. And for our next question, it's the questioner writes, what kinds of activities are Baha'is engaged in today in order to make sure that they are working with, serving, and learning from all individuals from various racial backgrounds?
Just writing it down so I don't forget.
Yep, and I can read it again here if you need it.
So Baha'is, something that's really important is that they do take part in the social discourses of society. So Baha'is are encouraged to participate in any activity that that promotes these tenets of the Baha'i faith. So racial unity is one of those things. You know, they might, you know, engage in certain social economic development programs. They usually bring on people of very diverse backgrounds as part of it, because we know through that diversity of thought, you know, we end up having a greater collaboration, greater success in projects. You know, Baha'i specifically, they do a lot of grassroots type activities. Like I had mentioned earlier, like if I go to like Papua New Guinea and someone there might be having a devotional, and they would invite, you know, everyone from their community, regardless of, you know, maybe their racism isn't as much of an issue because they might not have such a diverse population with regard to race, but they might have issues of class. And so we do see in the Baha'i communities across the world, such as in India, where there's a very, very strong caste system, that Baha'is, when they hold these activities and these events, they actually are inviting people to their homes of different castes, which is absolutely unheard of. It's just like the untouchables, those types of issues, it's unheard of. But Baha'is, they do actually do those things through these activities, such as, and I mentioned some of these grassroots activities are the devotionals, the children's classes. We have junior youth empowerment programs. We hold fireside discussions like this. And we also hold study circles to study the Holy Word. And so that also is, we invite people of diverse backgrounds so that it creates a fruitful discussion. And
Thank you very much.
if anyone wants to jump in, please.
Thank you. And for our third question this evening, the questioner writes, could you help clarify, is the destiny of African Americans and or the indigenous Americans to lead global humanity and all nations into global unification, or is it part of a shared destiny among all races, according to the Baha'i writings?
So I would say it's a shared destiny, but we do see from the writings that there is a very, very special role that African Americans and indigenous populations hold. I don't know why that is. I don't know if there's like some sort of, I don't know if there's a cultural aspect. I don't know if it's like an innate aspect. I don't know what it is, but there's something about the people of African descent that that we have to pay very special attention to, and that they will be leading in bringing about the light of God to the world. But of course, it's a shared thing, and we're all working together at this, and we all have that important role as well. And that's not to discount anyone. And in the Baha'i community, what's important within the Baha'i faith, it's not how much money you have or what your background is. It's your virtues, your qualities. So that person who has those virtues and those qualities, that kindness, that openness, that love, that caring about justice, these things, that is where the focus is on. Those are the people that we want to lead, and those are the people who are actually they're voted into positions of service or power. I don't like saying power, but it's really positions of service.
Well, and to dovetail with what you're saying, if for those that haven't had the opportunity to speak with either the Universal House of Justice as a whole or individual members, they always talk about it as a burden. It's not something they strive to. It's something that they labor for. It's not something that they can sit back and just watch TV or Netflix or things of that nature and play golf all day. Their time is consumed.
Just to clarify, that the Universal House of Justice is that internationally elected body that I had mentioned early. We have an international, so we refer to them as the Universal House of Justice.
Thank you for that. And so for our second to last question for the evening, for those looking to learn more about how the Baha'i faith approaches for those unfamiliar with the Baha'i faith, looking to learn more about how the Baha'i faith approaches cultural or racial differences in the effort to create a global peace or united humanity, where would you point them towards for next steps? What texts should they read, or what should they Google in order that they can find out more information related to tonight's topic?
That is a really good question. The internet. There are a lot of books. There are a lot of books on the writings of Baha'u'llah. The number, what is the number? It's really high. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I would say that there are certain books that I would recommend that are written by Baha'u'llah. There's the Book of Certitude, which he talks a lot about. The unity as a topic. There's also the book Baha'u'llah in the New Era, which I really liked. It was written by, was it Dr. Esselmont? It was a Western Baha'i who had actually met Baha'u'llah and who became Baha'i. He went to, when Baha'u'llah was imprisoned, he went and visited Baha'u'llah, and he learned about the faith. He ended up becoming Baha'i. He wrote a book. That's also, it kind of gives a very, that's not so much about, our approaches to the global, how we globally approach racial justice, but it is a good overview for someone who might be starting. You might also want to reach out to the Baha'i community in your city, who might be able to kind of point you to some of the activities. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have study circles. And as part of those study circles, we do often discuss how these quotes have implications on race, or implications on unity, or implications on any of the scenarios that cause social discord that are occurring now. Yeah. There's also, you might also go to Baha'i.org. There is a reference library, or Baha'i.us, I think it's Baha'i.org. There's a reference library that has all the Baha'i writings on there, and you can always just do a search, reference Baha'i library, and something might come up. I don't know, I think that's a good start.
Yeah, there's a ton of resources there. And also in the chat, people were highlighting Baha'i.us, Baha'i.org, just as you mentioned, as well as The Advent of Divine Justice, which is a book by Shoghi Effendi. Also free, available online. You can just Google that. And
that's a good
available.
book, The Advent of Divine Justice, yes.
And an easy read compared to
it's funny. Yeah, it's actually, it's about 150 pages, but it's actually a letter. They're just like, this is too long of a letter, we need to make it a book. So that's a really good book. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. It slipped my mind.
And it looks like Dr. Bashir Lahia has it just as,
yep. I showed it already.
Just to the side there. Yeah. All right, and for our last question for the evening, in thinking about the idea that one can adopt the practices and teachings of the Baha'i faith, for example, the elimination of slavery, the elimination of jihad, the equality of men and women, the belief that there is one God. Can one adopt these beliefs, but not necessarily adopt the teachings of the Baha'i faith that Baha'u'llah is the most recent manifestation of God? Is it possible to believe all the teachings of the Baha'i faith without necessarily following Baha'u'llah himself?
It's an interesting question. You know, it's kind of like, so the way I think of that, and please, if anyone wants to add, you know, I think sometimes we're very concerned with like how we label ourselves in our society, or what labels we take on. And these are just names in the end. But the essence of things, like if you see a flower and you're like, it has this smell of a rose and it looks in this way and it brings forth this type of beauty, and you see all the qualities for which it embodies that it is a flower, yet for some reason you don't want to call it a flower, that to me is an interesting predicament. You know, Baha'is do believe that we need to recognize all the divine messengers as being from God, and I mentioned that earlier. And as I mentioned earlier, we revere them fully. You know, I read from the Bible, I read from the Quran, I learn and I take very similarly to how I read Baha'u'llah's writings. And that until humanity is actually able to do this, we create separation, and that it actually might inhibit the unity of mankind. But of course, there are people who are very much able, you know, embody these things and lead very peaceful lives and lead very fulfilling and loving lives, and it doesn't really cause conflict. But we do know that there are a lot of people who use these names or these things as separation. And as Baha'is, we're trying to eliminate that separation and try to say, like, we are all part of this one thing. These are just words. These are just names. Christ never came and said, you need to call yourself a Christian. Muhammad never came and said, you need to call yourself a Muslim. Baha'u'llah never came and said, you need to call yourself a Baha'i. They never said those things. We as human beings have done that and have created separation. And so why are we doing that is the question. It's a good question.
Alex, can I add something here? That's a very good question, in fact, that somebody asked. There is a metaphor here. If I have a headache or something, I go to doctor, and I know this doctor is good doctor and writes prescription for me. And if I don't use that prescription, It doesn't matter that about the doctor. If I don't use that prescription, the action is involved in a sense in this thing. If you don't use that, it would not bring about this unity that she's talking about. It's not the name that consider me Baha'u'llah, Baha'i and the Christian or something like that. Is the deed that speaks for itself and brings about the result.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Bashir Lahi. That's a phenomenal way to put a bow on this evening's presentation. It certainly speaks to everything that Moji has introduced in her talk, and then answered again in the Q&A. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Again, thank you, Moji. Really, I really enjoyed very much listening to you and learned so much. And really, I can't thank you enough and your family again.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Rob, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Please.
O thou compassionate Lord, thou who art generous and able, we are servants of thine, sheltered beneath thy providence. Cast thy glance of favor upon us. Give light to our eyes, hearing to our ears, and understanding and love to our hearts. Render our souls joyous and happy through thy glad tidings. O Lord, point out to us the pathway of thy kingdom and resuscitate all of us through the breaths of the Holy Spirit. Bestow upon us life everlasting and confer upon us never-ending honor. Unify mankind and illumine the world of humanity. May we all follow thy pathway, long for thy good pleasure, and seek the mysteries of thy kingdom. O God, unite us and connect our hearts with thy indissoluble bond. Verily, thou art the giver, thou art the kind one, and thou art the Almighty.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks, everybody.